fairground. You know, we are incredibly lucky here in the West Country because of the number of really good fairs that we've got. I mean, what have we got? Health and Flora, we've got Tavistock Goosey, Summer Court, not to mention all the regattas with the whirligig of the fairs that accompany them. And a lot of our fairs have got the most tremendous historic pedigree.
If you like to ride the big one, come on, take your seat. Skyfire calling for riders.
This is Summer Court Fair near Truro in Cornwall, held every September the 25th. There are 250 fairs like this held each week in Britain. Just about all of the rides, like this one, are family-owned. And these showland families, there are 5,000 of them in total, tour their rides around the country, joining up at town and village fairgrounds with other families and their rides and sideshows to present a form of popular public entertainment that in various guises really has stood the test of time. The fair coming to town really was an annual highlight. Today, each fair is organised by a lessee who knows who's coming and who marks out the pitches. Summer Court is organised by David Rowland. His sons, Shane and David Jr., have rides here, and his parents have been coming here for the last 75 years, and their parents before them. In all, he can trace 7 generations.
I think fairs go back before time immemorial. This particular fair would have been made up many years ago of, well, perhaps two or three main families. One, of course, is the Rowlands family, who are very strong here today. I mean, all the Rowlands are here, the ones that are actually on the road. There are about eight, let's say, arms of the Rowlands family here, operating equipment. The Whitelegs, many years ago, were very strong at this fair. This year, we have showmen from all over the country.
Of course, the fairs themselves have been around since before the history books were written. This is the A30. Now, before Roman times, we know that this was an old tin road. It's an original in and out route for Cornwall. And wherever a road such as this is the tin road, met with another one, i.e. the Welsh Gold Road, which happens at Weyhill in Hampshire, then there would be a fair.
Roads such as these really were lifelines in medieval times. They were where you met and where you did business with people and where you heard all the news.
Summer Court Fair grew up alongside this route. Now, with all the traffic, trade would have been the main reason. In those days, of course, it would have been horse-drawn and pedestrian. But the merchants would have come here to ply their wares to the passing trade. And the entertainers would have been brought in to pull that trade in.
Summer Court might also have been used as a hiring fair, held every Michaelmas Day. These were brought in by King Edward III after the Black Death of 1348, when there was a shortage of agricultural workers. Along with prospective employers and their families, the men would stand watching medieval entertainers wearing an emblem of their trade. The shepherd, a tuft of wool, the thatcher, strands of straw, that sort of thing. There may not be a travelling job centre, but trade still has its place at Summer Court. There are 2 miles of market traders lining the A30 each September, and they're kept busy during the day. But now it's the entertainers who are the main reason to visit the fairground, and they really come into their own at night. The first rides appeared in the late 18th century, and contemporary prints show these as quite small and propelled by gangs of boys.
And possibly they were young Rowlands. Nowadays, Shane and David Jr. are manning rides, and a real constant through the centuries in fairground life has been the way that families live and work together.
The way it works with Rowlands today is that David runs the business while his sons operate and maintain the rides and sideshows. His daughter-in-law Claire, David Jr.'s wife, has a children's ride, and his wife Anne helps the older boys. The family essentially work to their common good, as has always been the way in show families.
Really, it's all about families. And of course, it's a 24-hour job, and we live and work together, and the association between the family is, of course, very, very close.
We don't know any different. It's all we've really done. We've been brought up from children to take part in it, and we haven't done anything different. We don't know anything different. We enjoy it, and I don't think I'd like to change it for anything else. And it's just our way of life, and we really enjoy it. For instance, we had some painting done on one of the rides, and it was Mum who didn't like it, and it all had to come off again and be redecorated. We had to rub it down and repaint it, had to go back to the sign writer, and it had to be completely repainted just because she didn't like the colours, and it didn't match the rest of the ride. And if it doesn't match, and if we don't all agree with something, it's got to be changed. We never buy a piece of equipment unless the whole of the family sits down and discusses, you know, if we're going to buy it or not. And if one of us don't agree, we don't go ahead with it.
And exactly the same thing applies to the other families at Summer Court, such as the Appletons, who've been coming here for more than 100 years, bringing with them the original bioscope, the forerunner to the cinema, a menagerie and a bizarre collection of acts and shows.
It's sort of bred in you, and you know, it is so difficult to get out of your skin, and so it passes on from generation to generation, as it's done with our families, as much as other families that travel fairgrounds in the United Kingdom. The Appleton family is a very big family. My father had something like 35 grandchildren, 23 great-grandchildren. You do need a big family, or particularly boys, in this business to carry on the name, and also for the purpose of, you know, getting the business about, because it is a lot of hard graft, as we call it, in this business.
It is a hard life now, but nowhere near as hard as it was in David Rowland's parents' time. For the first time in almost 80 years, Evelyn and Albert Rowland haven't been on the road with the fair and are instead staying in a bungalow at the family's winter quarters in Plymouth. They've been show people since the beginning of the century, when the rides were big and theatrical, made of wood and iron and pulled by horses and steam engines. The hard graft of Albert's time in harness has taken its toll on his health.
He's always hard workers, and I think a little bit too much of it I had. I worked too hard. Showman then might be a little bit different now, but back at that time, you had to work because you couldn't live otherwise. There is a lot of difference in the rides that they got today, because everything is lifted by crane. But in my young days, you had to carry it, which wasn't very light, you know. It was heavy equipment. But now it's all electric winch and all that sort of thing.
It was never a bumper, never a wonderful business. It was just, if you're a showman, you go on. Back in those days, nobody retired. They died in harness. But, of course, we have now, forced to. But it was a different way of life, and of course, you didn't have the conveniences they got now.
The day-to-day domestic life of the showman and woman has changed beyond all recognition this century, not least in their living accommodation.
There was no coal gas. You had to light a fire if you wanted to cook. They had like hostess fire, hostess stove in the caravans, they used to call them. Well, then it went from that to Primus. The Primus came in, that was a wonderful thing. And then they had Primus ovens that you cooked by. You see, so that you could, if you pulled in like some by the roadside, because you'd have to, for the engine used to take water. We're back to the engine days now. And while you stopped, Mother would make tea for everyone. So she'd have to light the Primus, put the kettle on, wait for that to boil, to make tea. Which now, I mean, well, they'd be horror-stricken if they had to do that, I think.
Things on the domestic front had changed considerably by the time Evelyn and Albert had a family, and young David and his brothers Jimmy and Morris had all the mod-cons that Calagas and electricity could bring to their caravan, even though the one-room living meant space inside was still always at a premium.
You'd have a kitchen, and we had a bath that came down from the door, but you had to fill it with water, kids. And then a little dinette, which would turn into a bed. And then there was another settee turned into another bed. And I was quite proud of that one, actually. When I look back, though, it was all red and white kitchen, and I think it must have looked like a...
How very different things are today, only 30 or 40 years on. David Rowland Jr. and his wife Claire live in this incredibly spacious and sophisticated trailer.
Caravans was nothing like this 50 years ago. I've got an American trailer, 36 foot. Everything I need in it, very comfortable. Settee there, makes a bed. pulls right and makes a bed. I've got 2 comfortable chairs, washing machine, microwave, big fridge freezer, everything I need, shower, bath, toilet, bedroom, big wardrobes.
Never mind that the fairground is often muddy, the work dirty at times, and the extended family always popping in. The show family's trailers are gleaming family homes. They're just mobile, as are all the other essential services they need, including education. While on fair day, these youngsters, as their fathers and mothers before them, will be manning stalls or selling knickknacks, they now have the benefit of a travelling education service.
Last a lifetime!
Evelyn had a brief taste of education as a young girl and, unusually for her time, decided her sons would have a similar opportunity.
I thought they should have a choice to do what they wanted, or be equipped for it then, if they did make a different choice. And so Jimmy went down to Probus. The college isn't there now. And everyone thought I was terrible. I think Jimmy was 8 or 9 when he went to school.
But that wasn't usual, was it, Evelyn?
No, it wasn't.
So why did you decide to do that?
Well, because we didn't have a choice.
Today, while David and Maurice are involved in the travelling fair, Evelyn's eldest son Jimmy also hasn't chosen another way of life. He runs what could perhaps be described as the fair of British fairs, the Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
It's just exactly the same really as travelling on the road. The only difference is where my brother on a Saturday night when it's pouring down with rain and they've got mud up to their ankles and they have to pull it down, my people just go around and turn the key and lock it up and switch the alarms on and we all go home. And then we get up in the morning just ready to go again. But basically it's the same. I come down here basically to see my family here, and at 2 o'clock when the lights start up and the generators start up, I will feel exactly the same as I do on next Saturday at Blackpool in the illuminations when we open at 10 o'clock. The lights will go on, the music will start, people will come, hopefully enjoy themselves safely. And the same thing really happens here.
So today it is easier, more lucrative perhaps, and an enduring and appealing lifestyle to those living it. They have no desire to adopt a different lifestyle to that of their forefathers, and yet that life bears little if any resemblance to how it was then.
Electricity has transformed the fairground, transformed the life of the showman and his family. And it's brilliant. I mean, this is really good. Everyone's having a great night out. But do you know, I'd love to know what it was like, what it smelt like, what it sounded like in the age of steam.
Ah, steam engines, billowing smoke, the smell of the coal, the hiss of the water, the organ. These were the glory days of British fairgrounds, surely. At the beginning of the century, when thousands would turn out to see the latest rides and spectacles at the annual fairs, staying on into the evening when the fairground lit up with oil lamps.
Flare lamps was a lamp that they used to fill them with paraffin. They had a reservoir, you see, and they pumped so much air in. And
Well, it came into the flare.
they call them a flare lamp.
They weren't
And when the
covered.
burner was going,
Yeah,
you see,
yeah.
if anybody was riding on the galloping horses,
Too close.
and they was lucky, they get paraffin drop on them. Of course, when the engines came in, well, you had the dynamos then, and then you was modern.
Can you remember seeing your first electric ride?
Yes, yes.
What was it?
Flying chairplanes.
Where did you see that?
Well, that was,
They owned them. So.
we had a set of galloping horses.
David Rowland has restored a carousel of gallopers, not run on steam, but as a nostalgic nod to those most romantic days on the fairground.
I bought the gallopers to bring back a little bit of nostalgia and a bit of, let's say, traditional fairground into our own grounds. You know, you can look around here today and see all these rides, these high technology rides, but there's nothing like a set of gallopers to be at the front of the ground with that organ playing traditional music, and I think that makes all fairgrounds. As far as we're concerned, I look back at the steam age, although I didn't remember it, but perhaps that did have its few ups and downs. I think particularly if you know, we're still doing the same fairs now that they did with traction engines, but of course back then it was up at 3 in the morning, stoke the boiler, get it up, and then over some of these roads that are terrible, doing 15 miles an hour, you know. So it had its good sides, and of course its bad sides.
Anyone that knows anything about steam, and there's lots of people in Cornwall, there's lots of enthusiasts now, would know that the bane of the life would be, or whoever had to do the washing, was the spots of oil that came back from whatever. I don't know where it came from, but it always came back. And the men's faces would be spotted with oil. And because you had no, we used to do the washing with on a rubbing board then. You just rub plenty of Sunlight soap into it and hope for the best.
Evelyn was a Jones who had descended from a very famous West Country fair family, the Hancocks, before she married Albert Rowland, and we can trace both families back to the days of steam. The first Rowland there are pictures of is Amy, born in a wagon in 1874. Her mother was One-Eyed Betsy and her father was Tom, who was a bit of a rogue by all accounts, and after a spell in prison for poaching, decided to move his traditional gypsy wagon further westward in the 1890s, where his talents as a fine painter were in great demand for the many new ornate rides being produced then. One-Eye Betsy had her last of 8 surviving children when she was over 40, and Amy became a second mum to the youngest in the family. In 1913, we know a namesake of today's Albert sent her a postcard telling her how a fire started by the suffragettes in Plymouth had caught alight the Hancock family's rides and organ. Amy was one woman who had no need of emancipation, for although she was blonde, small, with an elfin face and a sweet smile, we're told that belied a tongue that was as tart as a berry. And I should imagine she had a few choice words to say when her husband, Joe Rowland, got involved with a steam roundabout and ended up in court in 1907 because of complaints from local residents about the noise.
When steam actually came onto the fairgrounds and a new generation of rides were then created. You had the gallopers, you had switchbacks, many, many rides. And of course, that in itself caused a problem because of the noise. There was the noise of the traction engines, but I think most importantly was these massive grand fairground organs, perhaps 96 key, blasting out all different types of, brass, string instruments, and there was no control over the noise. They just simply blasted this out. And that in itself did cause problems. We, in fact, in our own family, Joe Rowland, was actually taken to court over this noise, this introduction of these grand, massive organs. And he went to court, defended himself, and managed to prove that the noise was reasonable. And of course, at that stage, there was no protection for showmen, no showman's guild. At a later stage, the guild was actually formed, and this day and age, they are there to help all of us to continue in our, what should I say, perhaps traditional family business.
The Showman's Guild and its weekly publication, The World's Fair, have probably been the most important force in the protection and promotion of the everyday existence of the showman in the face of much prejudice and suspicion. It's ironic the show families should have been greeted with suspicion, while the same public hungered for the more bizarre acts and sideshows on offer in the early part of the century, all very politically incorrect by today's standards. As the rides became more sophisticated in the 1920s and 30s, so competition between fair families grew, thwarting Albert and Evelyn's love in the process.
It used to be minding the swinging boats, they called overboats. We had swinging boats. So I used to mind the swinging boats and he was in the overboats. Right? And so we couldn't speak. So sometimes he'd go by, he'd have a money bag on the front and he'd drop a bar of chocolate in there, see? Say nothing.
Why couldn't you speak?
Oh, my father wouldn't, my God, he'd have killed us.
Why?
Well, there were opposition in business, and he would consider that I was telling the opposition our business.
But when the Second World War broke out, rivalries were forgotten as men joined up, transport vehicles were commandeered, and rides broken and sold. It seemed as though all the fun of the fair had gone forever, until the government had the imaginative idea to pay the fairs to open up again, to encourage the public to have fun on stay-at-home holidays rather than travel away on the overcrowded train system.
But if the Rowlands and others like them had helped to raise spirits during the war years, the public had other things on their mind when peace came.
The 50s, the youth culture began and the fairground changed its face once again. There's still plenty of that 50s feel, but Summercourt Fair is very different now compared to when it was first visited by Albert and Evelyn in the early decades of this century. Albert and Evelyn know everyone here, and Summercourt is a real opportunity to catch up on all the news from people such as the Appletons or David Broadway, alias Gypsy Akora, whose family always travelled with the Rowlands.
I came here about 70 years ago, as far as I can remember. I think it's longer than that, because my father came here when we were children. So that, and it was different then, because most of the bottom of the fair would be gypsies. They would be the lower class gypsies. And the top of the field would be the higher class gypsies. And they would all get out at night with a fire bucket, and they would dance on boards and play the clappers and do all this sort of thing. Yeah, and we were kids, we'd be looking around, you know, because it was something wonderful to see, really. We didn't realise it then, but when you look back now, it really was. It was, well, it's all part of tradition, isn't it?
David Broadway's grandmother was one of those aristocratic gypsies in the true Romany tradition. And just as she did, David, Akora to his public, has a constant stream of people all day and night at Summercourt.
And they would hold it like that. Granny went under the name Madame Zamra, and she used to travel in those days with a little pony and cart. And now we work out of a caravan trailer, but in those days she worked out of a little tent and put a little tent, and she used to tell the fortunes there. But she was, everybody known her as the old Gypsy Queen, because she used to do not only fortune telling, but herbs and things like that. It's changed. It's changed a lot, because nowadays the clairvoyant is more or less like a doctor, it's more like the clergyman. It's all in. I call myself now not so much a clairvoyant, but more of an advisor. You actually tell the future, and then people will tell you their problems, and you advise people on their problems. So I'm more like a Romany advisor. A lot of business people come to me, and they've got problems with their businesses, and so therefore, like years ago, they would only come to you for their fortune to be told. Simply come along and say, well, have I got a long life, or that type of thing. Nowadays, they'll come to you and say, is the business going to succeed? Am I paying too much money into it? Will I sell certain equipment? And they're talking mega bucks and that type of thing. It's a different ball game nowadays. It's going to be a mega change in your career line.
And there's one born every minute, perhaps. All aspects of the fairground have an enduring appeal, no matter how much they change and adapt to the flavour of the day. The people that live in the trailers, that travel around our region, survive by dint of knowing better than we know ourselves what fun we want to have. 100 years ago, chair planes were the latest thing, as long as you didn't get caught by the flare lamps. Today, it's the screaming abdabs on a white knuckle ride for some, the soothing platitudes from Akora for others. For the Rowlands, it's quite simply the way of life, and a way of life they just know will continue.
I love the life. Honestly, there's nothing else that I like better than to be on a fairground on a Saturday night with the music playing and the customers there, and that, you know, you look at those faces, it gives me a great deal of satisfaction, and there's nothing else that I would want to do or could even imagine doing other than being involved in keeping the show on the road.
Next week's Dynasty are the fishing Vinicums of Falmouth.